mute your microphone because the rest of us can't hear.
The other thing I would say is, while this is not a public hearing, but I know many of you are Copper Mine Road residents and so on, and we look forward to you hearing the latest that we have right now and our plans for next steps. It isn't a public hearing. It will be an update from the town administrator. I expect we will be having at our next Monday public meeting on the 27th, we will have a specific agenda item, which we couldn't do this time because of open meeting law restrictions. We didn't have time to, before the deadline, to take care of that. We will have an agenda item. And so anyway, just to let you know, but I'm delighted that you're all here. With that, as I say, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I'd like to ask for a moment of silence, please. Thank you.
I'd like to record the meeting.
Yes, if the meeting is being recorded by the recording clerk via Zoom in the event that the connection is lost at any time during the meeting and a device is being used by the recording clerk for the purpose of taking minutes. Mr. Gant has asked to record the meeting and has permission. Is there anyone else who wishes to record this meeting? Hearing none, we will proceed. The second announcement is Board of Selectmen videos. It is now the Select Board videos on demand. The Select Board meetings can be viewed by going into the Cable Watch video, Watch Cable Video on Demand icon on the homepage of the town's website. We ask that you check the town website for helpful information regarding COVID-19 under news announcements, or go directly to the COVID-19 page at www.topsfield-ma.gov. The town hall summer hours from now through Friday, September 4th, Labor Day weekend. The town hall will be closed on Fridays for the summer. The town hall summer hours will be as follows: Mondays, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., Tuesdays through Thursdays, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. The Select Board meetings coming up, the board will hold a work session on Thursday, July 23rd at 3 p.m. And on Monday, July 27th, there will be a Select Board meeting at 7 p.m., our so-called regular meeting. All meetings and work sessions will be conducted virtually using Zoom until further notice. All information to join these meetings is listed on each agenda posting on the town website. Compost facility. The compost facility at the highway facility, 279 Boston Street, is open for the season as of Saturday, July 11th, 2020, and will be open every Saturday until mid-November from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Vehicle stickers and one-time access tickets will be available through the Topsfield Board of Health by appointment only during regular business hours. Please call 978-887-1520 or email health@topsfield-ma.gov. Starting this year, if a homeowner is using a contractor for compost disposal, the homeowner must purchase a contractor one-time access ticket for $40. Homeowners may purchase multiple contractor one-time access tickets, but contractors may no longer use the compost facility under a homeowner's vehicle sticker or resident one-time access ticket. The resident one-time access ticket is $10 and the contractor one-time access ticket is $40. The resident season vehicle sticker is $60. And with that, I ask if there are any citizens' questions or comments outside of what we know we'll be talking about this evening. Hearing none, we'll move on. I'd like to begin with approval of minutes. And Lynn, would you be kind enough as clerk to make a motion and prepare these for us?
Sure. We have three sets tonight. So the first one, motion to approve the minutes of the Select Board meeting held on June 18th. It's a work session at 2 p.m.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Debbie, did you get my comments? You just sent something out and I just responded. Did you get those comments?
I did not.
Were those to the 2 p.m. one, Dick, or the ones that literally just came through with the FinCom?
Both.
Okay.
Just asked that we amend the minutes by adding the document information at the bottom of
Oh, we
that
did.
particular
That was
set of
already done.
minutes.
That was already done.
Thank you.
Already been done. So we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the work session minutes of June 18th of 2020. We have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Jackson. Mr. Jackson? Oh, aye. Mr. Hook?
I'll abstain as I was not an official part of that meeting.
Ms. Bermudez?
Aye.
Mr. Gant?
Aye.
And Mr. Spencer? Aye. The motion passes.
Motion to approve the minutes of the Select Board work session held on June 18th with the FinCom at 5:30 p.m.
Second.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yes, there is on that. There were several motions that were made by the FinCom. I fixed those motions, and Debbie has those. All three of them were transfers. The amount actually transferred was $150 versus the $146.48 that was mentioned. And each of those transfers were for a reserve fund transfer. Lou mentioned those words, but that's what the intent was. So
Dick, let me pause for a moment. We do not have a document in board docs for that, so I'm wondering whether we should postpone this until we have a document to look at, so we'll know what you're talking about.
I think especially if the public does not have the document, we should postpone it. I didn't realize the public didn't have it.
Lynn, is that
Yeah.
okay? We just postpone that?
Yeah, that's fine. I literally got it about 2 hours ago. Deb, did
Okay.
it go up on board docs?
No, that didn't because no, it's not up. No.
Let's
Okay, yeah, I have
let's
no problem
postpone that.
in postponing that one. That's
And,
fine.
Dick, I would just ask you to
Debbie has it. Debbie has
send
it.
your thoughts to Debbie or to Lynn for inclusion. Then we'll move on to the meeting minutes of June 29th.
Motion to approve the minutes of the Select Board regular session held on June 29th, 2020.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Hook,
Aye.
Mr. Jackson, Mrs. Bermudez,
Aye.
Mr. Gant,
Aye.
Mr. Spencer, aye. Motion passes unanimously. On to new business. First is recognition of police and fire department personnel. And is the chief with us? I'm looking around here. Oh, there she is.
Yeah, I'm here.
We have one.
So, Jen, if you would be kind enough to explain this for us.
Yes.
You're currently on mute.
Now you're muted.
We good now? Yeah. Sorry. We're all sitting close but sort of far apart. I wanted to just take a moment and recognize some good work that our staff did last week and undoubtedly saved one of our residents' lives. And I think all too often we go by without recognizing good work. And I just want to make sure that we did that. Last Wednesday, staff from one of the group homes in town called 911. And because one of the clients there was choking, his airway was completely obstructed. Staff there had initiated attempts to try to remove the object when Officer Sean Frost, which Sean was here. And
Yeah.
is he? Oh, okay, I don't see him on mine. Sorry. He was so handsome. Now I can't see him. Sean was right down the street when the call came in. So he was there within less than a minute. He was there and is able to continue the care that the staff was providing. He was, the patient was not conscious at that time. And then John, who are here with me, arrived and with advanced life support equipment and were able to remove the food from the person's airway and then to help to breathe with oxygen again. And so I was grateful for the fact that they were here in the station, that they had the equipment they needed, that everybody was dispatched in a timely manner, and the dispatchers gave the not only did the dispatchers dispatch, but they also gave instructions to the staff at the group home. And I just wanted to, I think it's important to recognize good work. And Sean, John, and John certainly did that every day, but certainly that night.
Congratulations. Nice work.
Good.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
That's great.
Good.
That's wonderful.
Good story, Jen.
We have a fire department as well as the whole town we're proud of, but the fire department so specifically and wonderfully helped at that point. So congratulations to them all. Thank you. And thank you for bringing it to our attention.
I'm personally glad that you and your team are there.
So thank you.
Don't you
Jen,
think?
you also had a fire that you prevented that you're not mentioning, which was great work as well with your team.
Oh, that was scary. Yeah, that was scary. I don't think that I think that somebody else was looking out for the young man who drilled his drill into the main electrical supply for the house. That was really scary. Yeah. Do you think that Officer Frost could smile?
That's great. There we go.
I just wanted to make sure that we don't complain all the time, that we also praise too. So
Yep, that's great. To the next order of business, fire department, the FM Global Prevention Grant. Chief, would you be kind enough to explain this, and then we'll accept a motion from the board.
Yep. Yeah, that's a grant that's put on by an industry, the insurance industry, and you can apply for it every few years, and we try to do that. And it's for prevention activities. So it will, in this case, it's going to help us with our connections with our regional dispatch. Now we have the ability to receive and see the information about pre-fire planning. So as we're walking through a building, a business, we're able to document where the electrical, gas services are and things like that, able to get contact information, and that will allow sharing back and forth. So our dispatch will have the most updated information. And on the way to, eventually, like on the way to a scene, we would be able to call up the information about the hydrants, water mains, all the other stuff that's kept in our computer-aided dispatch. So
that's
I motion
wonderful.
to accept a grant in the amount of $1,400 from FM Global for the purchase of a new computer for the Topsfield Fire Department.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Jen, really, is that FM or FL Global?
FM.
Oh, thank you. That's what the motion was. Thank you.
Excellent. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Hook,
Aye.
Mr. Jackson,
Aye.
Ms. Bermudez,
Aye.
Mr. Gant,
Aye.
Mr. Spencer, aye. Passes unanimously with thanks to you, Jen, for pursuit of that. And while you're here, let's move on to the FEMA grant.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I think it's more exciting because they recognize that we're here. And so the Assistance to Firefighter Grant is a federal grant under the Department of Homeland Security. We were fortunate enough this year to get a grant for that, to replace all of our portable radios. So our portable radios that we use, for the cost of one portable radio, we outfitted all of our vehicles with them. So we really, it was such a great, we did it with Middleton and Essex, our regional partners in the Regional Communications Center. So this was a surprise kind of federal grant. I think COVID was kind of a surprise. So it was COVID related, and it was a supplemental grant they put out, and it was for the fire department. So what I applied for, the federal part of it is $2,900 and some change, and then I think we have to pay like $500 or $600 as our match. But most of it's already been paid for, so it pays for the foggers that we bought, the ozone machines that we bought, the extractor, pays for part of the washing machine that we bought to clean gear, and then it's also to buy 695 masks. So it's most of it is to it will go back to the general fund because it's money that we've already spent, but we were able to recover it, and then the other part is to buy some more N95 masks. So there was there were 166 awards in the country, only 2 in Essex County. So we're very lucky and very excited to have that. We have 3 other federal grants out there waiting. So I'm grateful to Senator Warren, Senator Lovely, Brad Hill, Markey, all of our legislators in all levels were supportive and wrote letters in our behalf. So really appreciate that as well.
Nice going on that. Where's the 5% coming from? Your budget? The match?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great.
A motion to accept a grant. Oh, jumping the gun here, John.
Yes,
Motion to
thanks,
accept a grant in the amount of $2,990.48 from the Department of Homeland Security for the fiscal year 2020 Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program with the condition to contribute non-federal funds equal to or greater than 5% of the award or $149.52 for a total approved budget of $3,140.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Nice
I'm just
job,
going to
Jim.
say, I was
Nice.
going to pretty much say
Marshall.
that. I was going to thank you for all of the effort. I mean, I feel like every meeting, I've only officially been part of 2 of them, but I've been sitting in a lot of them, and I feel like every meeting I come to, we're accepting a grant from the fire department. Every dollar that you can get that comes from a grant is a dollar that the people of Topsfield don't have to pay for. So that is terrific, and I know it's not easy work to get these grants, so I thank you for that.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And I know this past week, Chief Hovey and I worked for a long time. There was a $50,000 Department of Justice grant that we applied for between the 2 of us. And I know that we take it seriously. We understand how much that, how lucky we are and to have the support of the community. And we would like to help in any way that we can financially because we still need a lot more stuff. So, I like couponing, so I sort of liken it to couponing. A good deal. So.
You're doing a good job on that.
Great job to both of you, in my opinion.
Yes. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Hook.
Aye.
Mr. Jackson.
Aye.
Ms. Bermudez.
Aye.
Mr. Gant.
Aye.
Mr. Spencer. Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you, Jen, very much. We appreciate that. On to the next item, Board of Health appointment. And Wendy Hansberry, our health agent, I see is here. And Wendy, I'd like to give you the floor to introduce this to us.
Thank you very much for having us. So we are actually putting forward an applicant for a vacant position that just opened up. We were very fortunate to have him reapply. He was a previous Board of Health member and actually was the chair for quite a few years. It's William Hunt. There, thank you. He's just raised his hand. So Bill is very familiar with the town. He's very familiar with Board of Health protocols and regulations and what's necessary to get the job done, and especially during this very difficult time in the challenges that we're all meeting. The Board of Health would be really benefit from his knowledge and experience.
That's wonderful. Would anyone care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I
Thanks,
motion
Dick.
to appoint William Hunt to the Board of Health for an unexpired term commencing July 15th, 2020 and ending June 30th, 2022.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a first and a second. Is there any further comment or questions?
I would just like to comment that I was sorry to see him leave a few years ago when he got tired of doing the thing that he had done beautifully for a long time. I'm sure that Cheryl Knutson was sorry to see him leave. When I saw his name again as a potential candidate, I was excited about it because he's a good guy and he's got a real place on the Board of Health.
Yes, thank you, Bill, for coming back.
Great to have his experience back and his capabilities. He certainly deserved a break, and to come back again, Bill. Thank you very much. The town really appreciates the quality of the people that we wind up having on the Board of Health with folks like yourself. That's great. I would like to make one other comment, though. We as the Board of Selectmen have talked about having interviews of people that come onto the board and then making decisions the following meeting. I would say that, and I certainly made the motion, that this is one of those cases where we've had experience with this with Bill, and he's been outstanding for a long time. So it's essentially, in my mind, a reappointment of sorts, and therefore our normal procedures that we've put in place don't apply the same way.
Dick, thanks for mentioning that, because I don't want anyone else to feel who goes through our usual process of having to wait after we meet, that it is indicative of anything other than the fact that you said we already know Bill and we already have seen his performance, so that it doesn't make the others feel badly that we're not putting him through the same process.
Essentially a reappointment, though. I think that's the way I feel about it.
Anyways, yeah.
That's really
great.
what it is.
Bill, could you put your hand up? There's so many people in this meeting. I can't see you.
You may have to move over.
I did. And let me see. Let me move over again. Oh, there you are. Okay. It just says house. That's right. Okay.
Is there an opportunity for him to speak? Can you unmute, Bill?
How's that?
That's good.
That's better.
Excellent.
Yeah, no, this is a house computer, so that's what we call it.
Okay.
Distinguish it from when my son lived here, all of his computers.
Well, thank you for stepping up again. It's a big job and a big time commitment, and we appreciate your coming back.
I missed it. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, that's great. Is there any further discussion before we take our vote?
Glad to have you back, Bill.
Thank you.
I'll call for a roll call vote now. Marshall Hook.
Aye.
Boyd Jackson.
Aye.
Lynn Bermudez.
Aye.
Dick Gant.
Aye.
John Spencer. Aye. Passes unanimously. Welcome back aboard, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll go to public hearing in National Grid. In this case, a public hearing involves an opportunity for the public to speak during one of our regular meetings. And in making that possible, we actually open a public hearing. So I'll accept a motion to open the hearing.
So
Motion.
Lynn, go ahead.
Okay. So a public hearing notice was published on June 25th and July 2nd, 2020. Legal notice, Board of Selectmen, Town of Topsfield. Notice is hereby given that the Topsfield Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing during a virtual Board of Selectmen meeting on Monday, July 13th, 2020 at 7 p.m. on a joint petition by National Grid and Verizon New England, Inc. to locate and install wires and fixtures, including necessary sustaining and protecting fixtures along and across the following public way. Petition plan number 29283713. National Grid to install 3 JO poles on Perkins Row, beginning at a point approximately 432 feet northeast of the center line of the intersection of Windsor Lane and Perkins Row, and continuing approximately 450 feet in a northeast direction. Installation of 3 JO poles, anchors, and guys, and all appurtenances in Perkins Row. Also, National Grid and Verizon New England is seeking permission to lay and maintain underground laterals, cables, and wires in the above-mentioned or intersecting public ways for the purpose of making connections with such poles and buildings as each of said petitioners may desire for distributing purposes. John K. Spencer, Board of Selectmen Chairman.
And
I
would like...
I motion to open such public hearing.
Yes, so thank you, Dick. So there's a motion to open the public hearing. Is there a second?
A second. I think Boyd already opened, though.
He put the motion. We didn't get a second. We didn't vote. All those, let me just go around since this is virtual. On the motion to open the public hearing, Mr. Hook?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
aye.
Ms. Bermudez?
Aye.
Mr. Gant?
Aye.
Mr. Spencer? Aye. So the public hearing is now open. And I would like to recognize who is with us from National Grid to speak to this.
Sabita?
Oh, Sabita. Yes. Hi, Sabita. How are you? Good to see you again.
You
Would you
too.
explain this in quick terms to us, please?
We're extending the primary to be able to feed the new URD at the end of Perkins Row.
What's URD?
Underground residential development.
Okay.
And so this is requiring 3 poles. This is all in the air from the existing primary. And what happens at the last pole? You have a request for laterals. Is that from each of those poles?
Yes.
That's what it sounded like. Okay.
So the laterals are to connect existing customers to the new wires that you're putting up?
There are no existing customers at that location.
Okay.
There will be a new development at that location. So we have to extend the primary to pick up the load of that new development.
Okay, thank you.
And these poles are on the east side of Perkins Road, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the laterals that you're putting in would not go across the street. They're simply going from the pole to the property.
Correct.
Just for our own purposes, the property across from that is pretty much wetlands and not buildable. But this is the sort of thing that we would want to be careful of because it provides approval to do laterals from the poles, but it doesn't specify only to the east. I'm not too worried again because there's nothing to the west that's reasonably buildable. But if you have one of these in the future, we may wind up asking you which direction and limit it if it's going to go across the street or whatever the case may be. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Obviously, we are always concerned about anything that crosses the street, whether they be wires or trenches. And obviously, from the highway standpoint, if we have to do anything in the street or under the street, we need to know about that.
That would be a different type of petition, but this is strictly an overhead petition. I don't understand why that verbiage is actually put into it. We are just running wires to extend the primary to pick up that URD.
Because I think so what's going to happen here is that's all we're going to be underground wiring at that facility. So they'll probably drop the underground at the last pole. That's why they asked for it at that location. But they have the option of doing it at a different pole because of the way this is written. That's fine. I'm on board.
Without doubt. Yeah.
Yep.
I agree.
We're still in public hearing. Is there any other questions, comments from the public? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Hang in there. It just took me a little longer to.
Oh, hi, Holger.
Yes. Yes. Hello. I'm as a citizen in this area, 294 Perkins Row, which is right close to the intersection of Windsor and Perkins Row. We're all a little apprehensive about whether there are any other changes that have to be made to the pole configuration that goes past our houses on Perkins Row, or for that matter, Ipswich Road. This is a 400 ampere service for each of these houses, and there's a lot of power. Perhaps the Mrs. Mahabel can tell us.
Actually, the configuration on the poles will not change. The voltage will, because we have to change that in order to pick up that type of load at the end of the feeder.
So the voltage will increase?
Yes.
From
So
what level to what?
From 4 kV
I
to
can't
13.
hear anything.
From 4 kV to 13?
From 4,000 to 13,000.
Does that require replacement of any of the existing wiring in order to support that?
Not the wiring, the structures. We'll be upgrading some of the poles along there.
Well, that's what I wanted to know about. You're telling us that it's going to change.
Not the configuration, sir. It's still going to be poles and cross arms.
Great. But you're going to change the poles on us, right?
Some of them, yes.
Some of them. Which ones?
I have marked the ones with an X on them.
Does that mean that you may have to go and chop down some of my trees?
Whatever tree trimming was supposed to occur has already occurred at that location.
That has not happened yet. There are a number of dead branches that I've identified to your agents, and as they told me, oh yes, they're going to come by and do that. Nothing has happened. And these are big dead branches, and they're going to fall on your 16,000 volt lines and make a big firework.
I will let the tree department
About that, because it's very scary.
I understand, sir. I will let the arborists know about it.
I would appreciate that, since I think we have lots of trees very close to country roads and poles, and hitting in storms is a constant issue in town. So care in that area. I happen to have been to the Luther's home and have seen some of those branches, and on his behalf, as well as the town's, would look forward to having some attention.
This is Windsor. This is on Windsor? No.
I said this was on Perkins Road.
It's on Perkins. What's your house number, Collier?
294. And we had a guy coming by, and he told us he was going to drop a line on us to make sure that they marked off the areas that need attention. In fact, I brought it to the attention of our tree warden, and he brought it to the attention of the National Grid. But you know, National Grid's one of the mossiest organizations in the world.
So, Rita, what I would ask is if you would please, using Mr. Luther's home address as one of the points, have that area checked again. And Kevin, if there's any question, Mr. Luther, I'd ask you to get in touch with the town administrator. We can't solve the specifics of these issues in our meetings like this, but it should be followed up outside of it.
Okay, I will let the arborists know.
Great. Thanks very much, Holger.
Is that all right? Is that all right with you, Holger?
Yes, and I'm not the only one. There are lots of trees that are very close, and some of them have long ago died of adelgids and various other things. They should be inspected very closely for being almost dead. And when they're dead, they fall over.
Yes.
Mr. Luther, if it's all right with you, maybe my office can reach out. We can find a time and socially distance and maybe walk some of that area and identify exactly what we're looking at.
I already did. If you ask Mr. Dave Bond, he will show you some nice view graphs that I made.
Okay.
So I will take this from this meeting, and if with your permission, Kevin, I will put it on you, and Holger, I will invite you to stay in touch with the town administrator so that you're sure that it gets the attention paid that it needs. Is that okay for now?
That's fine with me.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'll entertain a motion now. Seems appropriate to close the meeting. Do you have another comment, Dick?
Is there any other public comment after those comments?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going back and forth between my two screens of, we have about 40 people on this call, which is wonderful. 50 people on the call right now. I don't see anyone else. And by the way, the key is if I have a picture of you to just wave your hand, because I do try to look for that. I hear it, so I entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Take a roll call vote. Mr. Hook?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Ms. Bermudez?
Aye.
Mr. Gant?
Aye.
Mr. Spencer? Aye. Pass unanimously. The public hearing is hereby closed. I'll entertain a motion for the work itself.
Motion to approve the National Grid and Verizon New England request to perform utility work in the vicinity of Windsor Lane and Perkins Row, Topsfield.
Is
Second.
there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
This sounds pretty straightforward to me, and I certainly wouldn't want to hold up the installation of those homes there. So I think it's the right thing to do now.
Is there any further?
I do too.
Yep. Any further comment or questions? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. Roll call. Mr. Hook.
Aye.
Mr. Jackson.
Aye.
Ms. Bermudez.
Aye.
Mr. Gant.
Aye.
Mr. Spencer. Aye. Passes unanimously. Sabitha, thank you very much for being here. And please do follow up with the arborist. This is something that is not just in this neighborhood, but very definitely in that neighborhood, an ongoing concern. And your help in bringing their attention and working with our town administrators is appreciated.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Sabita.
Thank you, Sabita.
So we will now move on to item F under new business, the facility manager contract. And just because, I'd like to, Kevin, I guess I should, first of all, let's make the motion. And we're going to make a minor adjustment on this. The motion is to approve a contract between the town of Topsfield and Paul Anastasi as facilities manager for FY21. Is there a second?
Is there a dollar amount in there, John?
Not at this moment. I'm going to ask Kevin to explain.
So it's actually for facilities management services, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, it just
so the
says
motion is facilities management services.
Services. Thank you, Dick.
For
Thank you.
FY21, 2021.
Do we have a second?
And I'd like to clarify, the motion was for FY21 and it is for FY 2021.
FY 2021. Thank you. Just to be clear. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Kevin, I'd ask you to, as town administrator, just to brief us on this and then open for questions or comments.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And what this represents is an annual contract that we first started, as I understand that, last year when we brought on Mr. Anastasia to provide facility management services. He's been working on our Facility Dude product, which we hope to roll out later this summer, which is a electronic database that helps us manage our facility needs, our repairs, any type of capital items that are out there, as well as preventive maintenance that we provide. Mr. Anastasia will also be this year expanding his role in the sense of reallocating some of his time from town hall to support other town buildings such as the police, fire, library, Department of Public Service building, and the cemetery if needed. And so this is a continuation of what we've done in the past for facilities last year. The line item in the budget last year was $25,000. As part of the budget process, we were looking to expand that, but from budgetary constraints this year and acknowledging the need to be fiscally conservative, especially in these hard times, that budget line item has been maintained this next fiscal year at the $25,000 amount. However, if there's a need in other departments for facility support, there is money allocated in each department that should help support those other buildings if needed, if it can't be covered within that 25 that's within our own town hall budget.
Any questions, comments from the board?
Yeah, particularly big part of this is the scope of work. That's obviously what we're paying the $25,000 for. Could I just ask about one particular one? It says, assist in the development of a facilities manager job description that would be utilized for a job posting. Are we suggesting this is, I assume, for future years because we don't have any additional budget information? And is this because Paul doesn't want to continue to have the job and we're going to have to go find another Paul to write a contract with?
I hope not. I'm going to actually hand this over to Donna Rich, who works closely with Ms. Anastasia, who would probably be able to provide a little more insight into that specific question.
Thank you, Chairman. If I might speak in regards to this contract, the scope of work stating that is that if he does retire, he is a retired person and he does this on the side, so that in the event that he does not want to do it, I want him to help and assist with the writing of the job description. I don't see, it's just a matter of his assisting in that process if we have to do it.
Thank you.
I hope it makes sense.
Thanks.
Thanks, Donna.
Thanks, Donna. Thanks, Donna.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments for the board?
I'm not sure what we're actually approving if there's no dollar value.
The motion didn't include the 25,000, not to exceed?
It did not. John said Kevin was going to speak to that.
Kevin,
So
to clarify that, please.
Sure. So it's if the board would like, we could put in that 25,000. The thought was, in the event that Paul's going to other departments, like I mentioned earlier, the fire, police, and providing additional services there, and coming out of those other line items. The goal obviously is to be less than the $25,000, but this is so sort of uncharted water a little bit in that his use of his time is going to be a little bit different this year than it was last year. So if we would like to incorporate a not to exceed dollar amount, we certainly can. But our intention is to come in below that $25,000 total for his services this year.
So this is a not to exceed amount, and it's great if he can get all these things done without doing the 25,000. That's great. But how does this relate to whether he is doing the police department or the fire department or the town hall or the library? He's responsible for all of them now. He's done his kind of prototyping on the library and the town hall, but the objective this year, as I understood it, was to do all of the others that he could do, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So I see no reason why I wouldn't simply say not to exceed. And the great news is, if he can actually give him a bonus, maybe if he can do all his work for $20,000, that would be even better. But I think the plan was, and what was provided by town meeting was the 25,000. So I see no reason to not. If you believe this is the amount of work that he needs to do, $25,000 worth, which is what was the plea, we need that much money. It seems to me we want to go with not to exceed. Is that right?
I would put it in.
I'm willing to accept an amendment if you care to make it, Mr. Gant.
I'd like to provide some.
Okay, Mr. Jackson first. Sorry.
I'd like to provide some background. After we finished the building of the new town hall, it was obvious that we needed somebody to help take care of that building other than a few people that worked there. Okay. And it was decided that, and we found Paul as a retired guy that was willing to work part-time to help us with that project. Fact of the matter is, what happened was, and I suspected that it would happen anyway, was the fact that it turns out that we really ought to have a facilities manager to handle the town hall, the police station, the fire station, maybe even the highway garage, but the town ought to have a facilities manager. And I think that's what's happening. I think the job is going to grow. I think that we could live with a $25,000 expenditure at the moment, but let there be no mistake about it. I think the job is going to grow, and it should go in the direction where we should have a facilities manager. I have always felt bad about having Donna Rich and Beth Willis and Debbie taking care of our town hall. Okay, so that's how we got there. And I think the job is going to grow because I think we're finding out that we need a facilities manager. Thank you.
And just to what Boyd said, was discussed in depth when we were putting together the warrant for town meeting. And it was just decided at this point in time, with everything going on with COVID and the expenses, this is not something that we could push to move forward at this time. But we realized the need exists, and that's why we funded $25,000 to fund Paul to perform these, at least for this year. So for the fact that we discussed the 25 and that's the dollar amount that we had, I think it's important to put it into the motion not to exceed.
Would you like to make a motion to amend? Would you like to amend the motion as it currently stands?
I motion to amend the motion to add the following words at the end of that motion, for an amount not to exceed $25,000.
Second.
I'll take a vote on the amendment, not the overall motion, just the amendment among those on the board. Mr. Hook.
Aye.
Jackson.
Aye.
Ms. Bermudez.
Aye.
Mr. Gant.
Aye.
Mr. Spencer. Aye. The amendment carries. So the motion has been amended to now read, vote to approve a contract.
Could I just continue some of our dialogue here?
Yeah, I want to just make sure we're clear on what the motion is that we're talking about first.
Thank you.
So the motion currently is, with the amendment, vote to approve a contract between the town of Topsfield and Paul Anastasi for facilities management services for FY 2021 for an amount not to exceed $25,000. That is the motion on the floor at this time. Is there a second on the amended motion?
Yes. Second.
We have a second.
We already voted on the amendment.
We voted on we have an amendment. We have a motion.
I guess we have done it. We don't need to do that again. So Dick, you wanted to make some comments.
Discussion. Yeah. So I know what your feelings are here, Lynn. I have to admit we had a good bit of discussion about this, but to my way of thinking, there was no any discussion about going out and hiring somebody. We never brought anything to the FinCom about adding personnel. We kind of have a thing about no additional personnel right now anyway. And I'm not sure, but that and we talked about this also in the past, that perhaps this is best done as not a person that we pay as part of our staff with benefits and whatever else, but rather as a consultant, as Paul is doing. I'll just reach back real quick because it does go back 6 months ago to the MMA conference. I did talk with the facilities organization. There's a municipal facilities organization about what they were doing. And coincidentally, they were, as a group, looking at perhaps some people coming together to create a organization that would provide these kinds of services. So I think there's a bit going on with this, and I just don't want to leave it with the sense that we know that someday we're going to hire a facilities manager. We may continue to do it with the consulting services. The point well taken that we need to maintain our facilities. We're supposed to get some help from the software that Paul is going to help us implement. So going forward, we're going to watch this, but I don't believe that we've made any decision to hire somebody in the future.
No, I agree with you, Dick. I didn't mean to imply that we had made that decision, but when the discussion came up, there were some people thinking we should hire. There were some people saying we might do this on a regional basis and work with others.
Right.
And there was discussion about continuing it as a consultancy. But we said we're not even pushing that discussion forward because of the environment that we're in, and we just continued on with the same situation we had the year before. So I totally agree. We just stopped the discussion. Lots of different opinions.
The one thing I would say, speaking to Boyd's comments, the need won't go away, even if our ability to pay someone to take care of it the way we wish is not present. And I think the value of allowing our purchasing manager to use the expertise in-house if Paul decides to leave, and that seems imminent, taking advantage of that to get a job description, which could be used for being able to hire a consultant. We've made no decision, no commitment at all. I agree on a full-time position, but I'd like to be clear that getting a job description does not commit us to hiring somebody. It may just allow us to find a better consultant, not better than Paul, but better than we might otherwise.
I agree totally. I don't think there's been any decision made about the fact of moving forward and hiring, quote unquote, hiring somebody. That is a fairly lengthy conversation, in my opinion, and and we can shut it off there because there'll be a lot of talk about how we're going to do that.
Yep. So we have a motion on the floor. This is just for, and you will notice that when I restated it, I had facilities management services rather than in the verbiage of a position. Is there any further discussion among the board members? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Hook.
Aye.
Mr. Jackson.
Aye.
Ms. Bermudez.
Aye.
Mr. Gant.
Aye.
Mr. Spencer. Aye. It passes unanimously. Thank you. And now we move on to the select board schedule. And Kevin, I believe you put this together. Is that correct? As a draft?
So I'll actually let Debbie speak to it. Her and I spoke about the schedule, and I know, Mr. Chairman, you and I did as well. I think there's 2 versions. Is that right, Debbie? That
Yep.
that the board had a chance to review, and one of them includes the traditional. If the holiday falls on a board of selectmen meeting, it moves to the next one. The other one follows a consistency first and third week of the month for the meetings, where it gets pushed to a Tuesday in the event that there is a conflict with a holiday on that Monday. And it's absolutely it's just options for the board, I guess you could say, and looking at seeing if we wanted to do anything different or maintain what existing our previous policy has been, or informal policy around how we schedule those meetings. Debbie, anything you wanted to add on that? I know you put the hard work in preparing it for the board to review.
No, it's just, I mean, it's simple. If a holiday happens to fall on a Monday at any given time, the meeting gets pushed to a Tuesday rather than the following Monday, and then it throws off the calendar schedule. So it's just how you want to.
Well, thank you first. Thank you for giving us the option. At least it's a good thought to be able to give us the option. I particularly feel better if we try to keep it on Mondays. I think it's a more standard feeling for me to say that it's on Mondays that we have our meetings. And yes, that does lead occasionally to having a 3-week separation between some meetings because there's a holiday that comes in. But I think if we look at what those 3-week sections are, that'll help us decide whether it's appropriate to do that. And I'm willing to discuss the details of the thing, but that's my feelings on Tuesday.
The reality is we can at any time try a different schedule.
I think our meetings ought to be on Monday the way they have always been. And if we have a problem with the Monday, we will readjust.
So that would be schedule option number 1, version 1. Is that how people would like to express the motion?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be version 2 if we want the Monday?
Right. No Tuesdays. No Tuesdays. Thank you very much. Yes. So to be schedule version number 2. Would someone like to make a motion for that?
Can we just, okay.
We continue to talk. Absolutely, Dick.
Yeah. So at version 2, then there's 1, 2, 3, 4 times that we have 3 weeks between meetings, which would be the concern, if anything, perhaps. The first one is from August to September. Typically, the summertime is the time that's a little bit less busy. I don't particularly see a problem there. It winds up with a 1-week section in October. We might be able to move that so that we pick up a 3-week otherwise, but I don't see a problem with the 3-week between the 16th of November and the 7th of December. We probably wind up with some work sessions in there if the FinCom starts doing their deliberations and setting out the standards for the coming year. As far as the January 3 weeks between the 4th of January and the 25th, that I believe we're going to have additional work sessions typically because that's when when the various drafts are coming in for budgets, and so we'll wind up talking more there. The one that I think is a little bit different that I might change though is in March. There is a meeting on this is Monday meetings, on the regular meetings, on the 1st to 15th, and then it jumps to April 5th, which is the 3-week separation. my suggestion is that we go with 2 weeks apart, the 1st of March, the 15th of March, and the 29th of March. The 29th of March would be some 37 days before the election, which would give us the 35-day buffer where we have to make some decisions on ballots and stuff. So, and that's a very busy time. January, February, and March are a very busy time. Once we hit April and the warrant is baked, then I think we have a little bit more flexibility. And I would say then, we could go with the 5th or move it out a week, and then also with the 19th, move that one out a week. Also, if while I have the floor, just a typo correction on the month of May 2021, the first date there of May 4th, change it from 2020 to 2020 to 2021.
Is there a sense of the board that you would like to go ahead and, if a motion is made on the version 2 calendar, to include a March 29th meeting in that schedule as presented?
I like that idea. I think we end up adding in March anyway. So it's good to start out with it on the calendar.
Yeah, we have, we can make adjustments if we need to, but as much as we can, if we can get a schedule out to everyone, and we try to adhere to it. Sometimes we add meetings. Rarely do we cancel them, but we will. We could go forward. It seems to make sense to me too. Marshall, do you have a thought on that?
The only thing I'm going to say is I can't promise that I'll make every 3 o'clock meeting. I'll do my best, but working a full-time job that doesn't end until after 3 o'clock in Boston, I can typically get out of that early periodically.
Wait a minute. This is for the board to decide when is a good time for us to have meetings. If we should be changing it from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock or something like that, that's what we should be discussing now. This is to help whatever we can do to accommodate everybody to make the meetings. We understand that things will happen, but to start out with, when we bake a schedule, it ought to be able to be best for everybody. What's a good time for you?
I mean, giving me making it 4 o'clock would give me a whole extra hour to work with. That would probably increase my ability to come to probably close to 100% of them.
I would be very much in favor of that. 4 o'clock still allows us to get home for a reasonable dinner, and will perhaps propel us to finish early as we get hungry.
Okay. That would be that would be my only thought, is 3 o'clock can be difficult, not impossible. 4 o'clock becomes a lot easier.
Does that sound okay with you, Boyd and Lynn and Dick?
Yes, great with me. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Debbie, I think we'd make all the working sessions, we could change them in the future, but let's assume all working sessions will be, in fact, 4 p.m. on the calendar for the time being.
Thank you.
This is in version 2.
The 22nd of February, that is vacation week, is it not? I should have checked that. That is the President's week. Do you know offhand, Debbie? I'm sorry.
Oh, is that the...
Yes, it is.
It is?
Yes.
So we should be aware of that fact that it is it's the vacation week, but it's all right with me. But that means that's a holiday. Whoops. Isn't that a holiday then?
No.
Or is it the 15th?
The holiday's the week before.
Oh, good. Then it's all.
Then it's not a problem.
You answered the question. That's why it is as it is. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nope. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I make another suggestion? There is the public forum shown as the 27th of April. I would suspect it might be better to move it 1 week earlier to the 20th. Again, it may change, but if we're going to schedule something, and the reason I say the 20th is we should have the warrants out by that time, and the more time that folks have to listen to the forum, participate in the forum, and then go to town meeting. Otherwise, it's on Tuesday, and then a week later is the town meeting. It's just a suggestion. This will give 2 weeks before the town meeting to have that public forum. But there may be others or whatever. It's just a suggestion.
Was that date suggested by Steve Whalen, since that's his meeting?
Yes. Oh, that's the date.
Don't change it. Nope, that's it. Don't change it.
So it does say tentative date, and I'm sure we'll have conversations before then, and any changes could be made well in advance for the benefit of the public.
Now, with this schedule, though, I would ask that we remove the June items for this reason, that we're already into this, and this is being approved at a July 13th meeting, and we had other meetings during June that are not listed here. So it would seem to me that,
They're all on there.
okay.
But to Dick's point, I don't think we have to retroactively approve the things we already attended. We actually approved already the June and the July dates. But I don't mind keeping July on here because it's the fiscal year, but I don't see a need for June. It's already over and it's last year.
My only question is, if we were approving an official schedule for the Board of Selectmen, shouldn't it reflect our entire schedule instead of just a portion of it? Otherwise, this is blank. What do we do in June? Well, there's no official record other than looking back at all the dates of the minutes.
But we already approved it in its last fiscal year.
Oh, did we? We did approve a June schedule, didn't we?
Fiscal year, it goes from the town meeting through. So it's not technically fiscal year.
But we did approve, Debbie, I think Lynn is exactly right. I think we did approve a 1 month schedule.
Yes.
Waiting
You
to
approved
get
June
some.
and
So
July.
on that basis, I would agree with the thought that maybe we could take the June meetings off because they have already been officially approved and start this particular calendar from July 2020.
I'll go either way. I just had it was just a thought either way.
Yep. No, I think that maybe makes it clear. That said, is there someone who would, Dick, you've been making most of this. Would you like to make a motion and for version 2 with the changes you suggest?
Yes, I make a motion with the version 2 calendar as presented with the, version 2 calendar with the changes that were discussed.
Second.
There's a second. We have a first and a second. Is there for any further discussion?
You're all right on all the changes, Deb? Thank you.
Yes, she always does.
Okay.
Hearing no further discussion, we'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Hook?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Ms. Bermudez?
Aye.
Mr. Gant?
Aye.
Mr. Spencer? Aye. It passes unanimously. Debbie, thank you very much for putting this all together on our behalf. We look forward to seeing the mildly revised version sent to us, and that'll be great.
Thank you.
So with that, we have now come to select board updates, and I'll go round robin on this. For those of you just sitting in, these are opportunities for individual board members who may have, sometimes it's just one particular piece of interest, something that they are involved in, and the chance for them to share. We do this just before the town administrator's report. It's usually not a big piece, but it does give us a chance to keep each other up to date. So, Mr. Jackson.
I have nothing to talk about particularly, but there are two subjects that I'd like to hear about, and that is, I'd like to have an update on what's going on with the drive-in theater, and I'd like to have a discussion about Copper Mine Road.
Both of those are on the TA's report.
I'm assuming both of those are going to be covered by Kevin.
Yes. Marshall?
Nope, nothing to add right now.
Lynn?
No updates.
Dick?
Yes, perhaps a little bit. We had a meeting and we actually approved the minutes of that meeting on the 29th of June. That was not a regularly scheduled meeting, but importantly, it was telecast live. But I'm not sure how many people had a chance to observe that meeting. So I thought perhaps it might be good to review that. And in the same way, a real quick review, which we typically do at the first meeting after town meeting, which would typically be in the May timeframe, to discuss town meeting and the elections. I would like to comment on the elections, for example, that we had some 800 people, I think it was 810 to be exact, that went to the poll, who voted in it. And as Beth explained to us, about half of those, in other words, 400 of those were done with mail-ins, and the remainder were people that turned up and actually voted on site. So that was a relatively small turnout for the town, but I assume that the mail-ins helped a lot because they represented 400 of them. As far as the ATM, it went quite well for those who had not been there. As far as the time, the comment that Steve Whalen made is we should do this in a football field more often because we made it through so fast. I'm not sure that's a good suggestion, but it was a quip that he is in the newspaper for. And I give a lot of credit to all the people who helped bring this thing together because it's not easy to change the way we've done things, change the venue and those circumstances in the midst of a coronavirus. So I know we've talked about it before, but I'd like to do a real thank you to the whole group that put that together and had it come out so well. The last meeting that we had, though, on the 29th, the two major things that happened there, first of all, that's how we got reorganized, and that was when John Spencer became chair again, and Lynn Bermudez was, again, the clerk. But also we approved two memorandums of agreement, one for the fire department, full-time firefighters, and that was a three-year contract. So that's the agreement for that. And for the police, it was for a one-year contract. And lastly, my comment would be a follow-up to what Boyd was talking about, that we also, at an earlier meeting than that, in June 24th, the Board of Selectmen approved a license for the Essex Agricultural Society to have a drive-in theater on their property. And that
A temporary drive-in theater.
Well, and it was from July 1st to December 30th is what we issued as a license.
Great. Thank you. For updates, I have none, and I'd like to turn it over to Kevin Hartunian, our town administrator, for the town administrator report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Select Board. So I'm going to go through some updates for everybody. I know we have a number of guests. I believe a number of them from Coppermine Road. So I'm going to vary off of when I'm talking about infrastructure. I have a little more detail to share on the Coppermine specifically. For Mr. Jackson, I will, and for Mr. Gant and the rest, I will give an update on the drive-in. We also have Chief Hovey on the call as well, who on the first night, him and I, as well as Chief Collins Brown, were present for the kickoff of the event. We'll note I was able to make it out of there just as the rain came, and Chief Hovey did not. So he managed to make it through the entirety of it, even through the rain. So
Kevin,
you there,
Kevin.
Yes.
Can I just, I'd like to ask, as we have so many people from, I believe it's Coppermine, I recognize some of the names. So I want to ask whether you might move that to the beginning of your updates in case others are, that's the only thing they're really here to hear.
Yep.
And also begin by saying that my understanding, and every selectman I've talked to, is that there's a general consensus that we really want to see Coppermine Road repaired. And I want to emphasize that this is not an uphill fight with the board at all. We're on your side, and we really think it needs to be done for so many, many reasons. There are some significant challenges, but we don't think they're insurmountable. We just have to take care of some steps to be able to do it in a way that is legal and appropriate. So I want to be clear that the concern of the citizens is heard, has been heard, and will continue to be heard, and we will continue working as a board with the support of our town administrator to get a resolution on this. This is not something that we want to let go of until we found whatever answer we can that's going to work best. So with that, Kevin, if you wouldn't mind starting with the Coppermine Road piece, because I know there's so many people waiting to hear about that in particular.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, absolutely. So just high level, I've been working with residents at Coppermine, Joyce, Tony, and a number of other residents who I've had the pleasure to talk with or meet in person. But we've been working on that for some time. I actually, my first day on the job on December 9th of last year, I received an email from Joyce with some really great detail and a request to take a close look at the issues that the neighbors are dealing with up in that neighborhood. Since that time, well, we had I do want to mention that Vice Chair Bermudez was present at that meeting with me on site in late December when we met a number of the neighbors to review the issue in person. Had a great conversation with the neighbors, had some due diligence. Obviously, being my first day, I wanted to get some better understanding before committing to anything. But since that time, spoke with Joyce, who's Kanar, who's the representative from the neighborhood regarding this issue on a regular basis, I'd say. Very good conversations. Spoke with a number of other residents and neighbors who reached out to me directly. Spoken with the Ferncroft Country Club general manager a number of times, as they are an abutting neighbor of the roadway in question. Spoken with the neighbor's attorney on a number of occasions. Spoke with our attorney at KP Law, the road commissioners, the highway superintendent, the town administrator Middleton, and others in regards to this issue. So over the months since we've met last, there's been a lot of work happening on that front. Just to position again what the situation is, the sole access road to the residents of Coppermine neighborhood is deteriorating and is in desperate need of repair. I think everybody, including the board and the road commissioners, all agree that is the case, and obviously the neighbors as well. The road in question is 3,524 square yards. It's located in Middleton, between Locust Street and Middleton and the Topsfield line, which is the start of the development where the 32 units, housing units, are located. Estimated cost to repave the road is around $50,000 plus or minus, based on our numbers, based on outside numbers we've obtained, and the scope of the work helps determine that number, obviously. So it's based on what we've seen, around $50,000 is what we've determined. The developer, the original developer from the late 80s, early 90s, we believe has never conveyed ownership of the road. And when he passed, it was given to his heirs. The neighbors have reached out to the heirs of Flatley Company, who've not shown any interest of providing any support in addressing the issues with the road. Also, I've spoken with the town of Middleton. The road has not been accepted for maintenance purposes at any time since its inception. At the 1997 annual Topsfield town meeting, the town did vote to accept the Topsfield section of the Coppermine Road as an accepted road, meaning for maintenance purposes. And a few years ago, the road was paved in that section. I have not seen any documentation that from that town meeting or any documents associated with it that indicates the Middleton section was contemplated at that vote. However, the town does have a deeded easement from 1998 that's with the Registry of Deeds for access in and out of that section of the road in Middleton. Most recently, last week especially, and through the weekend and then today as well, spoke with a number of the neighbors, and where we are is that the neighbors have asked us to take a closer look at the easement language to see if it allows Topsfield the right to make improvements in the section of the road in question. The language in the easement does not specifically indicate repairs are the responsibility of the town. However, we're trying to interpret what we have the ability to do, if any ability, through our legal counsel. And right now I'm working with KP Law on that, and we're having some good conversations. And I'd say that part of those conversations is also understanding some liability associated with road improvements or no road improvements, et cetera, for the town and others. And I just say, generally speaking, right now, there's some really good momentum that's taking place in regards to Coppermine Road and trying to find a positive result for everybody. What I'd like to propose, and the chairman and I spoke about this earlier, is that we schedule a formal agenda item at our next select board meeting on the 27th of this month. By that time, we'll have much better guidance from KP Law, and I'll have time to speak with some of the residents that I've been working with to discuss some of the options heading into that meeting. And so that's sort of my ask at this point is that we have a little bit more time to do a little deeper dive before we can come to any sort of path that we should be able to take on that. And just my final thought on the situation. It's been a difficult few months as for everybody. I personally, and I know we collectively, appreciate the neighbors' patience during the sort of unprecedented times we've been dealing with. But I just want to reassure everybody that we have not lost sight of this issue by any means. Finding a solution to this issue is a priority of the select board, road commissioners, myself, and many others. And no pun intended, but we're really digging in on this. We want to find a result that's going to help. And I know I've said this to a number of neighbors. I'm not going anywhere, and I know the board's not, and others. We're here to help. We're here to find a solution. We got to untangle some of the legalese that surrounds the issue at hand. So just in summary, my plan is to continue to try and find a solution to this not so easy problem, and to make sure that we're communicating as often as we can with the neighbors and the representatives, the highway or the road commissioners, as well as the board and others, as we work through this together as a team.
Kevin, just two questions for you. First, who do the Flatley heirs say own the road?
So I haven't personally had an opportunity to speak with them. I know that speaking with, I had a really great conversation after we met on site in December. Joyce and I sat down, and she's done a significant amount of research into the road and the documentation associated with it. I actually offered her a job as a detective in our police department. I hope that's okay, Chief Hovey. So she's done some really great work, and she's very passionate about this. And one of the things we talked about at the time was that the belief is that the Flatley heirs are the owners. And I don't necessarily want to speak on her behalf because it's been a number of months since we had this conversation. But at the time, my recollection was that they sort of spurred the idea that they have any obligation to do any repairs on the road. And that's certainly an uphill battle in that sense, if there's even a road to travel on that. Sorry, puns. But
so there's really two questions with that, Kevin. One is, do they think they own it? And the second is, do they think they have any obligation to repair it? So mine was more to the first question. Who do they say owns it?
My understanding is that it's actually, and this is secondhand. I can't verify this personally because I haven't had the opportunity to dig that deep yet. My understanding is that when Mr. Flatley passed, it was put into a blind trust, and that somewhere some heir has ownership rights that they may or may not be aware of that road. And I believe when earlier, prior to my coming into this position and starting to work with the neighbors, I believe the neighbors had reached out, and my understanding was that they denied that they had an obligation to make any type of repairs.
I'd like to make a comment. Thanks to Mrs. Nahr, because she's done an incredible amount of work, and I think we will be appreciative of that in the long run. I would like to say that reading her documents that's been provided and looking at the Flatley the road, what am I trying to say? The road
easement
for the easement. Okay. The easement, it looks to me like, and Kevin, I'm going to depend on you to take care of those legal issues, but it looks to me like the easement says that gives and it's a recorded easement, and it gives the town of Topsfield the right to maintain that road. I don't think it talks about the fact that we have an obligation to maintain that road. However, I'd like to go one step further. I think even though we may not have a legal obligation, I think we have an obligation to the residents of Coppermine Road, our Topsfield residents. We have an obligation to them, and we have an obligation to our police department and our fire department and the U.S. Mail to maintain that road. And I think we ought to get on with it as soon as we can. And Kevin, I expect you to cover those legal issues so that we can move forward, because if we're going to pave that thing, we need to do it this year.
What is the latest when we could pave, Boyd?
October. Okay. Pardon me, Kev.
I was just going to say the timing on that a lot of times depends on the weather and how late the asphalt buildings will stay open, and that can vary. But Mr. Jackson's accurate. October, sometimes November. occasionally they'll sneak into very early December if it's a very mild beginning of the winter. But we would certainly want to have a better direction prior to that, and understanding sort of some of the liabilities and processes associated with it. Like I said earlier, it's a non-accepted street technically in another town, but there is that easement that Mr. Jackson pointed out to, and that's one of the key questions that we're having our legal team really dissect to give a better understanding. And like I mentioned earlier, we'll certainly have something for our next meeting regarding the ability to do it based on the easement.
I'd just like to make one further point. The town has a budget issue in the sense that if we decide that we're going to pave that road, and I am of the opinion that we should, since it's an unaccepted road, we can't pave it with what I call Chapter 90 money, which is state money, which means that money will have to come out of our budget somewhere. And that results in a reserve fund transfer probably. And that complicates things a little bit more. But in fact of the matter is we ought to roll up our sleeves and get that resolved and get it done.
Kevin, can we get that out of the reserve as opposed to a special town meeting?
If the FinCom sees it fit out of the $100,000 that's set aside in the budget to use some of those funds for this purpose, I believe that would be an appropriate option to take if everything else checks out in the ability to do so.
Yeah, my sense, Kevin, is that things are moving a lot faster, number one. The holdup is not with the town. We're ready to take action once we understand that we're not stepping off into areas of liability that we're unaware of. But it's not that we're completely unwilling to consider taking on liability. There probably would be. But just to get really clear on those pieces, which does take time because it's outside people and agencies and so on who we need to get some information from. But one of the things that we as a board would like to do is when the picture becomes clearer and we believe we know enough to take action, I think it's the intent of the board to take action and not to dilly-dally around on that. So the key right now is getting a little bit clearer to be sure that we're not opening up for the benefit of Coppermine. I don't want to make that that is extremely important to us, but if for some reason or other there was a potential liability that would affect every other resident in town, we just need to know what we're getting into. We don't foresee that there are, definite stoppers, but unfortunately, we really feel we need, on behalf of the town, to run the government well. We do need to cross the T's and dot the I's, but keep moving.
And Kevin, whatever we can do as a board to help convey to KP Law that this is very important to us. I know how busy they are, and sometimes you don't get the response that you're hoping to get because they've got so many things on the plate. Just let us know what we can do to show them it's a priority.
I appreciate that, Vice
I was
Chair.
just going to add that as the new guy here, I had very little knowledge of what this was before I saw the emails. I took valuable chunk of Kevin's time today making him explain it to me. I went into that phone call thinking, how hard can this be? This will be easy. Like it's a no-brainer. And I came out with, all kind of tied in knots because it's very much a brainer, if that makes any sense. But then I went out and drove the road. So I don't think anyone questions the need for this work, the vital need for this work. Clearly, people aren't even driving on the road at this point. They're driving on the grass around these, I don't even want to call them potholes, these enormous divots in the roadway.
Craters.
Yeah, they're monstrous. So I'll just echo what everyone else says, that I think, and I hope that people who, the residents, hear from us that we absolutely are on your side on this, but it's not something that can just be done like that. And there is more knots to be untied that I think we're working on.
As I've said before, I'm in favor of getting this done and getting it done quickly. However, there are some issues that we're confronted with, that if we could have used Chapter 90 money, it would have been a lot easier for us to just do it as part of our road maintenance projects. Since we now can't do that, now we have to justify in our mind using taxpayers' money to pave a road in a town that is not in a neighboring town that's an unapproved road. And that just complicates things a little bit more. But in my opinion, we got to get around that and get it done.
Yeah, I think that the key issue, Kevin, from what you've described, is that we have to understand who owns it, and then what are the options based upon that? How do we get approval, and what are the liability risks associated with moving ahead to get that paved? Because I think we're all in agreement it needs to be paved, but we don't know who owns it and how we move forward without knowing that. Who do we get approval from? Who releases liability? Do we have to transfer ownership of the road? All that KP needs to lay out for us.
Yeah, it's absolutely, Vice Chair, and it's understanding what rights we already have, right? Non-accepted road, as Mr. Jackson said, what the easement allows by it in itself with the wording that exists now. And those are the details that we're paying close attention to, that we're working through. And then obviously the ownership component of it would be a lot easier if there was an active owner that we knew existed, who was willing to participate. But obviously that's there's other paths we can take, I think, at this point that could hopefully find a positive result for everybody, especially the neighbors.
I'm not sure that the most important thing is to know who owns it. Unbelievably, I don't know that that's the key thing, since there is this easement that is documented in the Registry of Deeds. Do you believe that that's the most important thing, Kevin, to find out who owns it?
I think
seriously.
No, honest, great question. I think the most important next step is to find out the rights in the easement.
Is to find out the what?
The rights that we have in the easement and what those mean if from a liability standpoint, if it is positive.
So,
because the wording in the easement only says that we can repair the water main. It does not say that we can repair the road. We can take steps necessary to maintain the water main. The thing that Joyce mentioned, the case, which may be very pertinent, is, there was case law that says it gives us the right to do paving, but that's not stipulated in the easement. And if someone else owns that road, we can't go in and start working on it without the authority to do so. That's like me going over to my neighbor and repaving their driveway. If I don't own it, I can't pave it.
Well,
and right now, it doesn't sound like we know who owns it.
Let me speak a little bit to the easement side as an example of other easements and how they are operated, just so it takes it out of the emotion of this. It is very often that the town is granted easements for drainage in a subdivision, whatever. That easement gives us the right to have water flow over it, but to maintain that easement. In other words, if a beaver decided to build a dam in the middle of it, we have the right. The owner can do something too, but we have the right to go in there as the holder of the easement and to maintain it for what it's intended for. And so we have to find out the liabilities. That's fine, but I'm not sure that is really the stopping point. And let's find out what those liabilities are. The suggestion was that liabilities are our concern. Let's assume that the liabilities are eliminated. And I think you suggested, John, we're ready to go. What would we do? We don't have a problem with ownership. We don't have a problem with liabilities. How would we solve this so that this thing is ready to go in October? I mean, ready to use in October, not ready to pave in October. You suggested that we were ready to go. What would we do?
I think the ready to go would be, I suspect the Board of Selectmen will have to make some decisions about the town's position vis-a-vis taking this action. And we will do that on advice of council, obviously. And second of all, there would have to be identification of the source of funds and then a process for committing it, which again, we can do. Those are not, interminable processes. They can be done in a matter of weeks and so on. And I think at that point, the wheels would start to turn fairly fast. As Lynn was intimating, we have to be very careful that we don't dig, and again, I'm going to use bad puns like Kevin, that we dig a bigger hole with a problem in it than we seek to solve. I don't think we're going to. I'm cautiously optimistic about this, but let's just be sure we go in this eyes wide open, so we're not putting the town at undue risk. But this is a problem, and it's clear what we see we need to do to fix it. We just have to be sure that there aren't any landmines in the way. And I'm optimistic, Kevin, I'm looking at you on this, that in the next couple of weeks, we will get enough pointers that either we'll say, no, we can live with this, live with that, not a problem here, not a problem there, or this is the one thing we're going to have to find a resolution to, in which case, through whatever actions at that point, we can bear down and put pressure on that one or two issues to move forward. But
Kevin, could you clarify for me then, what are the tangled issues? I thought that the issue was, it was unclear as to who owned it. And because of that, it was unclear whether or not we could come in and pave. If we want to pave and we already know who owns it, and Middleton says, go ahead, I know it's in our town, but you're fine to pave it. What are the tangled issues?
Let me go back. So the easement, again, the question is does the easement, even though it's not prescriptive around maintenance specific to upkeep of the road, the easement allows for access in and out. It's specific to that. The KP is doing work for me right now. We've had some preliminary conversations on, does that, to I guess Mr. Gantz's point, does that in and of itself allow us the ability to maintain the road? Because typically roads need to be accepted for maintenance purposes. And in this case, obviously this road has not been accepted, this section of the road. So that's sort of the question I'm trying to untangle right now to Mr. Gantz's point. What's the number one thing, or the biggest question right now that's out there? In the event that it's determined that that the easement in and of itself allows us to have maintenance, to perform maintenance on it, then the ownership does not necessarily have as much of a play in this, because the agreement that was initially contemplated, if it's determined by our legal team that we can perform maintenance, then we can perform maintenance without necessarily saying owner, Mr. Flatley Jr.
We don't have to ask for the permission.
We don't need to ask for that permission, to Mr. Gantz's point, because we have that easement. If the rights within that easement, as it's worded, allows us to. If it doesn't, if the determination from KP is other, based on the easement, then we have to look at some other things, around, if the easement doesn't allow us to, then we want to maintain it through the easement process, then we'd have to get another easement with the ownership group. For example, potentially, this is just another sort of branch you can go down to get an easement now that says that we can perform maintenance on the road.
And who would be that ownership group that we would get that second easement from?
That would be a lot of work, but we'll have to figure that out.
And that gets back to who owns it. If you're going to get another easement ownership, you got to go back to the owner.
That's correct. In all reality, if legal says that we have the ability and we work through any liability associated with maintaining a non-accepted road, and there's a comfort level or whatever it might be, because that's a reality. If it's with an accepted road, there's a certain threshold of liability that a town has to maintain it. Whereas if it's a non-accepted road that we perform maintenance work on it, typically then there's a higher level of liability potential for the town to be exposed to. So all those are things that we're working through at KP. I'm going to put this all together. My commitment to the board, to the residents, to our team is to try to give you as much guidance and information as possible in the next 2 weeks so that you folks can make some good decisions coming out of that.
I'd like to address Dick's question about, let's assume that all of this gets done within the next couple of weeks and we can agree that we're going to move forward. Where do we go from there? I will tell you, it will take one phone call from Kevin to our highway superintendent and our chairman of the Board of Road Commissioners and to get it done, and they will be on it like a dog on a bone.
They'll just need the money for it.
That's up to us to find the money. It's not up to them.
So I hear a project plan here, essentially. This is a project that we're trying to do. And projects can be done in sequence. If you're going to build a vaccine, first you go out and you get some tests from a small group, but then you get another test, and then you build up, and then you go manufacturing. There's other things that go as a shotgun start. So I see no reason why, for this project plan, we're not spending time now figuring out how we're going to do it if, for example, any issue with the easement and our replacing it goes away. How are we going to pay for it, and how is the process going to go? If the process is to talk with the superintendent of the highway department, then why aren't we talking with them now and getting that straightened out and clear? Even to the point of maybe finding out how much it's actually going to cost, so that if, for example, we were going to do a reserve fund transfer request, we know exactly what we want to ask for. So my suggestion is that we start a project now, multiple things going on, and there's no reason why it can't happen. There's nothing stopping us from figuring out, if it's approved, how we would pay for it. And I would say that that's one. Another one is going on for the easement. Perhaps another one is to make sure that we have an agreement with Middleton that they have no objections to our maintaining it, to our fixing it and maintaining it if we choose to. So if this is a project plan, and let's get it, do it as a project, and not wait for the next and wait for the next until it's.
And
So if I could,
Mr. Hartunian. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, well, Mr. Jackson, thank you, because I've spoken with Chairman Knowles and I've spoken with Mr. Jackson representing the highway on the road and the budgetary components of it. Not being Chapter 90 is one thing we've already identified. We've talked about what money's committed for certain things out of our regular, about $70,000 in our operating budget for roads improvements, what's committed to projects, what's not. There are some certain constraints in that, but we already started those conversations of helping to identify that. From a cost of the road itself, we've gotten a couple of quotes internally from our team on it. Gary Wilds, at my request, has already been out there a couple months ago to put numbers together on what the road would cost. I know that Mr. Knowles has also put a number associated with it. They were within about $4,000 of each other. So that's the $50,000 number. I know that Middleton's actually put a number together for it, which was around $50,000 as well. I have spoken with the town administrator, Andy Sheehan, early in the process, and again, more recently. And I know that he is more than willing to work with us if, in the event that the town does find it suitable to move forward in being responsible for the road, in helping us move forward any documentation that's necessary, such as an intermunicipal agreement that outlines what responsibilities exist. So those balls are in motion as well. And also, I'd mentioned too, the other item that we're also talking about, and I mentioned it, but I'll say it again, is sort of the project plan, is the liability component. That's obviously something we want to have wrap our arms around as well as we work through the process. So I appreciate that, and I'm absolutely lockstep with you, Mr. Gant, on the need to make sure we're moving all those different levers simultaneously, so we're not delayed.
Well, we talk about liabilities, that if we do something, I think we need to crank in equally the liabilities if we don't do anything. And I think we have liabilities coming up, even though it's not physically property of the town of Topsfield. Maybe also Middleton will get sued, but I can assure you that we will also get sued for failure to deal with an easement that we had and providing safe access, and the only access to that particular facility. So let's crank in the liability both ways. And if we have to, I would say the liability that we want to take on is to do the work and let somebody from Flatley tell us that we are in trouble and they're going to take us to court for having done the work.
So I'd just like to say that we as a board will have to make a conscious decision to make a decision that engages the town in accepting a greater liability. I'm not saying we're unwilling to do that, and it will be a conscious decision we will talk about, and perhaps as soon as 2 weeks from now, if there is a balance between do nothing and do something and so on. I think I know which way the board is leaning, but we can't do our job of representing all citizens of the town if we don't use due diligence in going through this process. We're trying to do everything, do due diligence, and still make the wheels turn as fast as they reasonably can at this time. And I hope there's some trust and faith in us that, yes, I will admit that things seem to have slowed a little bit. We've had a kind of strange spring, but this meeting, for those of you who are residents of Coppermine Road and that neighborhood, I hope demonstrates that we are committed and will remain committed to getting a resolution on this. It's very clear that if the road goes away, we have very, very big problems to deal with, and it's not an acceptable outcome. So before we lose a car or anything else, we need to have a solution.
Kevin, are you comfortable that in 2 weeks when we get together, you'll have the answers that you need, that we can discuss options to move forward?
I'm going to do everything in my power to have as much information for you folks as possible.
Will we get information along the way, or are we going to wait until 2 weeks from now to hear anything?
We could certainly touch base along the way if that's the desire of any of the board members. My hope would be ahead of the meeting, obviously, to sort of provide some information to everybody once I've been able to compile as much as possible on what the directions are. But Mr. Gann, you can call me anytime, or any of the board members, and I'll give you an update on how things are going, and I'll reach out if I get any information that's significant along the way too.
Actually, it would save you some time. If you get some information, send it out to all of us instead of each of us trying to call you and spending your time trying to explain as you had to do with Marshall. He's up to speed now, but individually, when you get some stuff from KP or whatever the case may be, pass it on to me is my suggestion. Let me just talk about the dollars and the things that I've heard so far. I've heard Chapter 90, and I heard the problems with the Chapter 90. I've heard reserve fund transfer, and I know the problems with that. And I heard recently, just a moment ago, from Kevin about the use of the budget money. And so we should all be aware that for many years we've had a budget item in the highway, which is for roads, sidewalks, and bridges. And that amount is in the order of about $75,000. Now, there may be other projects, was your suggestion, and it's good that we have plans. We may have other projects that we're planning to use some of that money for. However, I would say that we need to do, and that is to say the road commissioners need to do, with some input from the selectmen if there's any question, that we look at what other projects are there, and we look at this one and say, which one is the greatest need? And based on that, make a decision how we use the $75,000, which is not constrained in any way by what the state may have for Chapter 90 constraints.
Yeah, Dick, I don't think
that's not a new idea. That's always done every year by the road commissioners. I would also like to add the fact that the resurfacing, the repaving of that road is not a big deal. It's a relatively minor project, and that's not what's holding us up here. What's holding us up is the legality issues about who owns it, what the easement really says, what the easement gives us the right to do, and all that kind of stuff. I believe we can find the money. As you said, Dick, we've got a road maintenance fund, and that's conceivably where the money's going to come from. The road commissioners control that, however, and they'll look to us for the guidance about doing it. But the actual job of fixing that road is a relatively minor process.
Thank you.
I'd like to suggest is we're going to have a meeting on the 27th, and we're going to get a lot of updates at that time. Kevin, I'm wondering if there's any further information at this time. I understand that this is not a 100% answer that 3/4 of our guests in the meeting today would like to have all the way, but I hope that it is some encouragement that we're on your side. Number two, that this is being taken very seriously as a top priority. Number three, that we believe there's money to do it if we can just get past the liability questions and some of the easement questions and so on. It's really just getting a few more ducks in a row and understanding our options. I don't think we're going to get a perfect answer, but let's not let perfect stand in the way of the good and needed.
It's exactly right. It's exactly.
So, with that, looking at the clock and so on, I would like to suggest, Kevin, that perhaps we continue with your report. And I would like to invite all the members of Copper Mine Road and those of you who have been present, certainly welcome to stick around for the rest of this. But please do come join us on the 27th. And the board docs, which is a document available through the website, that has in advance, the beginning of the day of the meeting, all the documents that the select board gets to see are published there, which allow you to look at the documents we are. So if there are, if there's a letter or some opinion or something or other, you will have a chance to look at it and see that it's there too. And I hope that we will have a direction going forward from there. To the board, does that seem reasonable at this point?
Yes.
That sounds good. And thank you, Kevin, because I know you've had a lot of balls that you're juggling. There are a lot of people to touch base with on this issue, and that you've made really good headway. I'm confident we're almost there.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And it's a pleasure to work with all you and the neighbors.
Great. And thank you, Copper Mine folks, for joining us here. I appreciate that. Look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My opinion is we're going to get there.
We are. We're going to get there.
We're going to get there.
It's a how, not whether. So, Kevin, we do have a regular meeting that we're going through, and I know it's tough to kind of shift from this issue that has such energy for so many of us, but I think we need to move on to the rest of your report so that we can all get home for some sleep tonight, or at least turn around and go to bed.
My pleasure, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So just sticking with the theme of infrastructure, Route 1 paving continues. Again, most of the heavy work is happening in the evenings. Some of the sections of towards the Ipswich side have already been started to see some paving coming, being put down, which is great. Continue to work through that. Also, we've talked about the complete street money that we received and the sidewalk improvements that are going to happen on Grove Street and a section of Washington Street. That work is to commence the week of July 27th at the earliest. We are sending out in the next day or two letters to all the residents that are about the project, providing some information, but also inviting them to a Zoom call to discuss with us, Gary Wilds, myself, and the consultant, the logistics of the project and what they can expect. I think I've spoken this before. This is sort of what we anticipate our ongoing, regular operations when it comes to a road project, to make sure ahead of it, we're getting in front of as many residents as possible or those affected by it to provide good information to them. The last thing on the infrastructure is we are looking to receive in the next couple of weeks our one-of-a-kind solar light that we've built for the downtown. It's a one-of-a-kind built, part of it in the Netherlands. It's been shipped. It is local. On Wednesday, Gary Wilds will be putting in the foundation. Again, that light, the first one is a sample, a pilot that is at no cost to the town as a result of working with the spec lines and the positivity around the concept and the work that's been going on. So that's to come. And also we're looking at a shared streets grant, which just became available to actually potentially help fund some of the other lights we're looking to put in the downtown, but we're hoping to get the pilot light up first so we can get a sense of how that output looks and get some feedback from the community. So we're working on two fronts on the solar lights. COVID-19 update, phase 3 went forward on the 6th. We've continued to work with and receive calls from businesses, specifically a lot of wedding venues, but we're personally reaching out to them individually, both Wendy and myself, to talk through any questions they might have on how they can pursue events at their facilities. There are certain limitations that currently still exists in the phase 3 rollout. And we continue to have public safety meetings related to COVID Thursday mornings on a weekly basis. Thank you to Chief Collins Brown, Chief Hubby, and others on the call who participate and help provide communication and efforts to keep everybody safe. And I do want to just say our numbers over the last month consistently been very low, which is encouraging. But we do need to make sure that we continue to do all those great things that the community in Topsfield's doing. Wear those face masks when you're in public, avoid gatherings, etc. Those are the reasons how hard everyone's been working here locally is really the crux of why our town has been well positioned through the crisis and continue to be. So we just need to continue to be thoughtful and continue to be diligent on that front. I'm going to move over to collective bargaining. As Mr. Gannon pointed out in his updates, we did have the 2 MOAs for police and fire approved. This week, I'm working on the CBAs, which is inserting basically the language from the MOA into the CBA to have a new CBA document that we'll then bring to you folks for final ratification of that. Next week, I'm meeting with the call firefighters, and I have spoken a few times recently with the ASME rep. He represents the Highway, Parks, and Cemetery and the Water departments about meeting this month for a preliminary meeting on their contract as well. And next up for communications will be the reserve police officers as well. Downtown revitalization. Met today with leadership in the Topsfield Community Partnership, as well as Vice Chair Bermudez to discuss VHB design concept, which we're looking to hopefully have privately funded, which will give our streetscapes a consistency throughout in our downtown and will allow for us to get some conceptual drawings, which can hopefully motivate and spur some potential investment in looking at what's possible grants that can help fund some of these infrastructure improvements as well. And I'll just say throughout the COVID-19, we've been consistently meeting. We've had Zoom calls, we've had individual outreach proactively to different businesses to discuss how their operations are going and to try to make sure that people are able to survive through the crisis as best they can. And then just general town operations activities. Just a reminder for everybody that we are currently operating under summer hours with a late night on Mondays. We are open till 7 p.m. on Mondays until Memorial Day weekend. And that the building is available to the public by appointment only at this time. I'll mention that the Council on Aging, new virtual programs are coming available. I mentioned the last update, but I'll mention it again. But the Supper Club starting at 5 p.m. this Wednesday will be the first iteration of that virtual programming opportunity. You can find more information on the Council on Aging homepage. Council on Aging, I worked with Director Paula Burke and myself, worked on creating a plan on the AARP tax preparation 2 Fridays ago and 3 Fridays ago when the building was not open after hours, and came up with a very safe process to provide 13 clients between those 2 days, local clients who were able to help have their taxes done ahead of taxes being due. The clients were incredibly thankful that we were able to do it. And AARP actually looked at the model from the safeguards we put in place, and they're actually implementing and they're planning for next year in the event they have to do tax preparation during COVID, looking at a lot of the local AARP, I should say, the regional and state, looking at some of the things that we implemented locally in looking at that as sort of their standard operations in communities when they offer the AARP tax preparation. So kudos to the team for putting together a safe process and allowing people to still get their taxes done. I'll mention too that we have a full-time firefighter who has left the team. Mike's going to serve in Ipswich in his hometown. And so we've looked to fill most of his shifts over the next 2 months, July and August, with call firefighters. And that we're based on precedent and historical and talking with some of the team members. We do know that it's going to be difficult to fill those slots heading into September in the fall. And for the public safety purposes, but also for the safety of the firefighters, we are looking to post that position, which is a little bit unique to the hiring freeze and how we've handled it thus far. I've talked with other team members Chief Hubby, Gary Wilds, and others who have been affected by the hiring freeze. They understand what the fire department's up against, and that we're going to continue what we've always implemented with this change with the fire department in this instance. And to that end, I will reemphasize that the hiring freeze and the discretionary spending freeze is in place for the foreseeable future due to the economic constraints that we're dealing with. We've also been working to update our temporary policy on board and commission meetings. We've followed state legislation that's allowed us to pause on some of our meetings, but we do realize that we are reopening and that there's people that do have the need to still do business through our boards and commissions. Our operations on a day-to-day basis are open, as we've talked about, but we do want to make sure that people have the opportunity, whether it's a business license or something else, to continue to move forward. So we are having discussions internally about what that might look like in regards to broadening what the existing scope of what boards and commissions have currently been taking up over the last few months and what that might look like. And we do have a meeting internally with three department heads who are affected by this to discuss what they're thinking might be appropriate. And then we also have the mandatory water ban in effect. It's still in effect. We've talked about that. And then the conclusion of the updates, which I know a few of the select board were looking for, was Topsfield drive-in update. And like I mentioned, Chief Hubby, Chief Collins Brown, myself, we met on Friday evening on site for the drive-in. Prior to that, earlier in the day, Glenn, our building inspector, was on site inspecting the staging and the scaffolding that they put together for the screen, as well as the area, the housing area for the projector, the other side of the field, to make sure it met code, which it does, hurricane resistant, etc. And as the evening went on and the show started, we had about 225 vehicles that were purchased. I think we had about 10 additional vehicles that came on site and purchased tickets at the gate. We talked about the max of 250 vehicles, so we had about 235 on site for the first showing. It was Star Wars, Back to the Galaxy. I don't know, one of the Star Wars movies. Sorry, I don't remember the exact show, but Spirits
Empire Strikes Back.
Thank you, Marshall. Back. Thank you, Mr. Hook. I appreciate that. It's a little before my time. I shouldn't admit that.
He's young. Marshall Hook is young enough. He would know.
Yeah, I missed the Star Wars. I got the remake of the Star Wars. Anyway, I'm dating myself now too. At any rate, really high spirits. People seem to be very happy. Everyone seemed to be following guidelines, wearing the mask, social distancing when they were in line for the concessions. Chief Collins Brown, myself, and Chief talked about the neighbors, and Chief Collins Brown ran some recon for us, went up to the surrounding neighborhoods to see if there was anything visual or audible that could be seen from there. Reported back no disturbances from that front. No complaints have come through our office in that sense. So all in all, it seems like it was a pretty successful evening. We're still talking with EJ from Fiesta Shows, as well as Jim O'Brien from the fair. And I've got a call. I have to return to Jim to just touch base on how things are going through the weekend with regards to it. But all indications are that things are going well. And I mentioned earlier, I do have to give another nod to the chief for braving the rain Friday night when some of us less worthy took to the cars and headed out of town. But no, really good high spirits, like I said. And I just say, just generally, I always like to give a synopsis of how everything's going from the team perspective. We've been dealing with a lot here in not just in Topsfield, but other towns. But our team here has just been fantastic with responding to the issues, and the business continues to happen, and that spirits are continue to be high, and the work continues to be done at a high level. So just thank you to the team for that.
Thanks, Kevin. Quick question just on the traffic. How did that work? Did a lot of people come early, or maybe the chief could answer this, come early and space out, or did everyone come at one time? And how was it when they left, when the movie was over and everybody left at the same time?
Well, I'll give Chief the nod to that one. I know it worked pretty well, but I'll let you speak to the specifics, Chief.
So the cars coming in, they trickled in over a length of period of time from 6 o'clock all the way to the start of the movie at 8:45. So there was no congestion whatsoever on the people coming in to see the movie. The exiting on the first night, I was there. I stayed for the duration. The first car started exiting at 10:51, and all cars were off the property by 11:03. So it took about 12
Amazing.
minutes for all the cars. The longest backup was about 10 seconds with 5 cars in line, and only to take a left-hand turn going southbound. On the second night, we lost some cars, probably 20 or 30 cars due to the rain throughout the movie. But on the second night, they were full capacity, another sellout crowd, and it took about 25 minutes to have, from beginning to end, to exit the fairgrounds. The longest backup was reported back to me about 30 to 45 seconds, again, only to take a left-hand turn. So there was no public safety hazards whatsoever. There, even the social distancing and the food lines, they did a really nice job with the serpentine pathways, and everybody was very, very compliant, from the porta potties to the midway bathrooms to the hand washing to the face mask. So overall, it was a great success.
Well, that's great.
I was just going to point out one other thing that is proven to be a plus for the community that I don't know that we considered. They hired a bunch of teenagers, including my own daughter, who is there right now selling food. So they put out a call to hire up, and I don't know, they hired a dozen at least of our local kids to go work there. So
EJ said about 20 kids were hired from Topsfield and surrounding communities.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Chief, any idea? I know you can't answer this question, but any idea how many people were from Topsfield and from out of town?
No, I don't have those statistics. Actually, Kevin and I were talking about that, and I think it's on. With it being online sales, we were actually going to give them a couple weeks. Then we're going to ask if they could track that and what the history is, because we were really curious about how the flow is going to be and how many people are going to be taking a left-hand turn, right-hand turn, and going straight ahead, and what capacity was from Topsfield or out of town. So we're going to try to get that information. We're going to see how it goes for the next couple of weeks, and then with the online, they should be able to track that of where the it was purchased from. So,
Chief, could you tell, was anyone idling, or did they shut off their cars completely? Did you hear a lot of noise with the cars running?
We didn't hear any noise. Most of the cars were, shut off. The problem was there was probably 5 or 6 cars that would not start because of the ignitions were on, and to have the FM radio for the sound system, but they had everything necessary there. They had jump packs for all the motorists, and there was only one car that could not start with a jump pack that was left overnight, but was retrieved the next day. But that was the only issues of car batteries dying. But overall, great success.
And they're doing this every night, are they not?
Yeah, it's every night from now to Labor Day is the plan today. And they are going to have a concert on July 25th. It's a Blake Shelton, so it's a virtual concert. So they have hired 2 police officers for that evening because of their public safety concerns. So they're being very aware of it and cognizant of the fact that there might be an issue. But so they did hire 2 police officers for that night. That's July 25th.
I'll also mention that this week is Grease and Jurassic Park. I got those titles down.
There you go. The Hook family is going to go take in Jurassic Park tomorrow night, so I invite you all to come on by.
Yeah, you'll see my daughter is there with her boyfriend. They're really looking forward to it.
There you go.
And I'll say too, I just got to give credit to the folks who are running it. They've been very good about communicating. They reached out last week before the show started to me, and we had a chance to talk just to make sure everything was as expected. And they've continued to reach out periodically to provide updates and to keep the conversation going, which is much appreciated with such a significant event happening in town. Being aware of the ins and outs and the issues that arise, ways that we can collaborate, it's very helpful. So,
I can just see the meals tax flowing in now.
So it's been successful.
So far, so good.
Apparently good. That's great.
That's a good thing.
So what I'd like to do, and thank you all, and Neil, I think you in particular have really sort of taken a look at this and really helped keep an eye on it from a public safety point of view. And Jen, I know you're always aware when there are 250 cars full of people in town, you're thinking about who might have to be where for what at any given time. So delighted on that. Kevin, do you have something else?
I'm all set.
Oh, you put your hand up. Okay. I just like, for those few who may still be watching, there is some correspondence in the.
Excuse me. Can we just ask some questions of the various things that we went through here that Kevin went through?
Okay. Yep.
Oh, so Kevin, one of the things you mentioned is you're working on the collective bargaining contracts themselves. The one request that I would have is please get them to us as soon as possible, so we're not getting them the night of the meeting, so to speak, so that we can look at them and then hopefully approve them half a week later or whatever when we actually have a meeting. You mentioned that somebody resigned from the fire department. Well, who was that? I didn't catch the name.
Mike Bonanuto, Chief. So I did not do a good job in the last name.
Okay, I understand.
Jen, do you have the name?
Okay.
Bonanuto.
I did okay. Thank you. All right.
You mentioned the policies for commissions and boards. You said there were 3 department heads that you're working with. What that indicated which particular ones you were working with. Who are they? Which departments?
Sure. So I've been working with Heidi, our Concom. I've been working with Wendy from Board of Health.
Okay.
Been working with Donna Rich, who represents ZBA and the Planning Board. Those are the 3 department heads specifically. I've had broader conversations with during department head meetings and with other department heads that might have observed or had issues, such as the building inspections department and others, just to get some sense of what, if any, issues they're hearing from the larger community around how we're currently operating.
How it's affecting people's ability to do things, yes. But there's certainly no meetings associated with what Glenn has. But these are the 4 of them: Board of Health, Conscom, ZBA, and Planning. Those are the important ones, right? Well, everybody's important, but those are the ones that are particularly important. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you mentioned this shared streets grant.
Yes.
Is that what it is? What's the nature? We know what complete streets is because we've been through it. What's the nature of shared streets? Just the concept.
Yep. So Mass DOT has put $5 million into a pot that's available to any of the 351 municipalities in Massachusetts. You can apply between $5,000 and $300,000 for improvements, infrastructure improvements in your town or city that allow for there to be. There's 5 categories that are associated with it, but there are things like providing temporary bump outs and protective elements like jersey barriers for outdoor dining, or sidewalk improvements to widen sidewalks so that people can walk more safely. It's related to COVID technically. There needs to be a tie to infrastructure improvements that could help people better safely be able to go downtown, to go to a restaurant, to walk downtown, et cetera.
Under the new rules, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
and so one of the innovations, the category we're looking at right now is the possibility around the lighting, because it seems to check a lot of the boxes.
And it's probably not an ongoing thing. What we don't use this year is going to be gone next year because it's not intended for next year. It's intended for the COVID issues. Great.
Yep,
Thank you.
one time.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Obviously, if I go look, I'll be able to see the foundation for the new light. But tell me where it is.
I didn't mention that. Thank you. I should have. So what we're looking to do is we are going to be installing the light right next in the green space behind the sidewalk next to the Topsfield House of Pizza. It's a centrally located position. We have rights to that area, and will allow us to actually consider putting some sort of signage up associated with describing what the light represents, being first of its kind, solar powered, sustainable, and hopefully what we're looking to do is create an email address that. And I've been working with Chairman Spencer and Vice Chair Bermudez, but this was a suggestion from the chairman about, making sure that people's feedback can be received, which was always the intent, but creating a specific email address that people can email feedback to us so that we can gather feedback on what people think on the light. So far, the people we've been able to show the light to have given some really positive feedback, which we're excited for. But we would like to open it up now to the rest of the community to provide some direct input.
Yeah, Boyd, the other thing I've learned talking with Gary, I thought that the foundation was going to be poured in place. It's not. These are precast with bolt structures and so on and so forth in place. And there's a spike that goes down into the earth about 5 feet. So what the highway department will have to do is basically get a 2-foot diameter post hole digger or something equivalent to that. They dig a hole, and as long as they don't hit anything and get slowed down, they just put this in its place, backfill around it. So my guess is that the foundation and the light will appear more or less at the same time.
Question for any one of the three of you. I think there's a plan to add more of these lights depending on how it looks and what the public reaction is. Do you plan to replace the existing lights downtown with the new ones ultimately?
So
it's a complicated issue.
So we're right now in the downtown, we have the highway tape lamps that are hanging off of the utility poles.
Mm-hmm.
And they're on one side of the road only. And in the evenings, when you go downtown, it's very, I'd almost say treacherous to walk downtown or cross the road because there's not very adequate, the lighting is not adequate. So those lights, I believe right now I'm working with Mark, who's doing the photometrics. Mark's from Specline. He's doing the full photometrics for us on what a full build would look like in the downtown, separating lights out, the proper distances so that we have the proper current standards for lighting in the downtown using these lights and the output that they're projecting that they'll give. And so those in and of themselves should be adequate enough for the lighting purposes. And then the question would be, do we remove the high lamps that are up on top, or do we maintain those as additional lighting? Those details we're still working through.
Yeah, and one of the things in talking with Mark Boyd is that there's a question as to whether the battery capacity for the amount of solar collected energy is enough to power these lights all through the night. A possibility may be to have our solar powered lights on until say midnight or 1 a.m. And then with timers that are fairly inexpensive, then the overhead street lights would come on so that we meet lighting requirements. But during the time that pedestrians might be there or most people would be driving through town, it would be the more attractive street lights. These are questions that will have to be resolved. And my understanding is Mark's working very hard on that to give us the best information possible.
And depending on the financing too, the build out may be taking place over time unless we get this huge grant, in which case they all come at one time. But then you'd need those lights until you had enough of a build out that it would provide enough.
Absolutely. And I just mentioned too that the work he's doing on the photometrics, which is not easy work. It's real work to pull together the plans and identify how much output, where to locate them, is also being done at no cost to the town either. In preparation for possibly putting it in for the grant. So, so far so good on that front. If everything goes to plan, we should have some cost effective, if no cost, lighting in our downtown.
Good.
When do you think we'll see the first one?
I've been told that they're committed to having him in by the end of the month. I know Gary last week was in contact with Mark as he was working through the photometrics and the preparation for the potential grant application. And I know that he was talking about making sure they knew when the installation of the base would happen, so then they could basically his Mark's team, the people who are going to install it, he needs to let them know when the base is and then schedule them in to do it. But they've said in the next couple of weeks they'll be able to do so.
Thank you.
Kevin, who's actually writing that grant?
So it's interesting. Once the grant went live, I reached out to somebody I knew, and someone, Stantec, who did our parking survey, reached out to me directly as well and offered to help us write the grant at no cost. By the time they reached out, I was so excited for the grant that I'd already started to write it. So I'd already partly written. But I've, with everything else going on, Coppermine and others, having that second set of eyes to help support that effort is going to be really helpful. So I'm going to get it to a certain point. It was actually really interesting, and not to belabor the point, but I had a call with Stantec, who's going to be the ones who we're going to be working with directly. And I came in a little bit late on the call, and they understood the lighting was the option. I came on and said, "What do you think?" And they said, "Well, we're not sure if that's going to meet the criteria." And I said, "Well, let me give you my 5-minute elevator speech." And I walked them through what the light means to Topsfield and the work that's gone into it and the innovation behind it. The things I've shared with you folks. And when I ended, he goes, "Put that in writing and send it to us, and we'll get the grant." So I don't know if he was serious that he was that confident or not, but he made it sound positive that if we can word it the right way, it's actually, I've learned as well that District 4 and Paul Stedman, who's the district director, who I work closely with, and ran Tool Street project in Beverly, and Richie, who's another high up over District 4 who lives in Topsfield, are the people who actually be overseeing the implementation of the grant locally. So my plan is to also have a chance to reach out to him just to say hello and maybe mention the fact that we're putting a grant in for the lights as well.
And the sooner the better, right? Before the money is distributed, as soon as it's distributed, that's it. The 5 million.
Yeah, and I think the intent. Everybody I've spoken with has said the intent is for them to spread the money around. They want to see as many communities that apply as possible to see funding if the project qualifies. Some of the bigger communities, what I'm hearing is, are shooting for the moon, as they say, or going for the full amount. Smaller communities are not necessarily going for as high of a dollar amount. So I'm getting the final quote of what the dollars will be based on the photometrics any day now, and that'll help us define where the boundaries of the project are downtown. If we go as far as we want or a little shorter in this phase, based on what the cost per light ends up being, and then we'll make a value decision on, do we shoot for the moon again, or do we need to, or do we come in a little bit lower, get our foot in the door, get some lights up there, and feel better about the application. So all the considerations we're making right now.
Thank you.
I'd like to point out there is some correspondence that can be found if anybody is interested in board docs. And that leads us to our last motion of the evening, I believe.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Is there a second? A second for Mr. Gant. Roll call vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Ms. Bermudez?
Aye.
Mr. Hook?
Aye.
Mr. Gant?
Aye.
Mr. Spencer? Aye. It is unanimous. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much. And Neil and Deborah, thanks for hanging in. And Rita, Noah, and Lucas, whoever you are, delighted you stayed with us.
Debbie.
Bye now.
Take care.
Good night, everyone.
Oh, and Ron, too.
Thank you all.
Mhm.